Hello, nice to see you on my channel, Hearts and Shadows. Enjoy watching.
My name is Brian. I was so sure of the woman I was about to marry that I would have bet everything on her loyalty. And up until about 2 months before our wedding day, I believed I had found the one. But when I found out what she'd been doing behind my back, I made a decision that she didn't see coming. I had no choice but to walk away. I remember the first time I met Joyce. It was one of those mornings when I was out on my regular jog, earphones in, just try to clear my head. The route I used wasn't crowded, but you'd start recognizing familiar faces if you stuck to a routine long enough. She was one of those faces. At first, it was just a nod or a quick wave when we passed each other. Just that silent acknowledgement you give someone you see often. Then, one morning, she broke the usual routine. I had just slowed down near a water fountain when I heard her call out to me. She pointed at my shoes and asked, "Hey, are those any good for long-distance runs?" I was caught off guard as she smiled while asking. So, I told her what I liked about them. And that turned into a longer back and forth. She was surprisingly easy to talk to. That short chat turned into us, standing there for almost 15 minutes. She told me she lived just a few blocks from where I stayed. We even laughed at the fact that we'd probably been shopping at the same grocery store without knowing. By the time we were about to part ways, it didn't feel right not to stay connected. So, we exchanged numbers. That was the beginning, the first thread that eventually pulled us into something much bigger than either of us imagined. For the first couple of months after Joyce and I exchanged numbers, our conversation stayed light, just casual chats now and then. I wasn't in a relationship at the time, but I also wasn't out there trying to start anything. Life was steady, and I liked keeping it that way. From the start, it was clear that Joyce was already in a relationship. She never directly said, "I have a boyfriend," but she didn't have to. She'd mention when talking about weekend plans and post pictures on social media that made it obvious. Those kinds of subtle clues you don't miss if you're paying attention. And I paid attention. Because of that, I kept my boundaries sharp. I respected the fact that she was in a relationship, and I respected myself enough not to blur any lines. I definitely didn't want to catch feelings for someone who was already taken. So I kept things friendly, surface level. At that point, I saw her as someone I was cool with. Nothing more. And for a long time, that's all it was. After a while, she stopped posting. At first, I didn't think much of it. People go offline all the time. But a few weeks later, when she did come back, everything about her online presence felt different. Gone were the pictures of her and her boyfriend. Instead, she started sharing those quotes you usually see when someone's trying to heal. You know the type. Choose yourself. Healing isn't linear. Let go of what no longer serves you. Stuff like that. I'd seen enough of that pattern to recognize what it usually means. From experience, I knew those kinds of posts didn't just come out of nowhere. They usually follow a breakup. I figured something must have gone wrong in her relationship. But I didn't say anything. I mean, yeah, we were friendly, but we weren't close enough for me to start poking into her personal life. So I just observed, quietly. Then one day, she posted something that got me thinking. I can't even remember the exact quote now, but it had this heavy tone to it. Like someone who was trying hard to keep it together. That one made me pause. It stuck with me the whole evening. And I don't know what it was, maybe concern, maybe instinct, but I decided to message her. Just a simple, "Hey, are you okay?" She replied not long after. Said she was fine. I didn't push. But I did ask her casually why she'd been so quiet for a while. That's when she said, "Let's talk when we see." I'll be honest, that threw me off a bit. We'd never seen each other outside the jogging route. Never even talked about hanging out. So I just asked her kind of innocently, "Where are we meeting?" She suggested a cafe. One is not too far from both our places. I agreed to meet. We linked up one evening after work. The cafe was quiet and warm. We sat across from each other, and after the usual small talk, she opened up. She told me her silence online had been her way of trying to find herself. Her boyfriend had ended things, and she needed time to process everything. I could tell it still hurt. You can always see it in the way someone talks about something they're not fully over. Her voice was steady, but her eyes gave her away. There was pain there, and I'll admit, I was curious about what happened. Why did he leave? What went wrong? But in that moment, looking at her, I knew asking those questions wouldn't help. She didn't need to be interrogated. She just needed someone to listen. So that's exactly what I did. I let her talk. Let her get it out of her system. And man, she had a lot to say, like someone who had been holding back for too long, and finally found a crack to let some of the weight out. That evening was different. It made me see her differently as a person going through something hard, and trusting me enough to share it. That meeting laid the foundation for everything that came next. After that first cafe meeting, things between Joyce and me shifted slowly, but noticeably. We started spending more time together outside the jogging route. At first it was casual, a coffee here, a walk there. But over time, those casual hangouts became more frequent. She'd invite me over to her place some evenings to try a new recipe or just to talk, and other times I'd have her over at mine for dinner or to watch something. We just genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Now, I'm not going to act like I didn't notice how beautiful Joyce was. She's an attractive woman, no doubt. But I was cautious. I knew she had just gotten out of a relationship, and I didn't want to be the guy she leaned on just to fill a void. I've seen that story play out before. You give your time, your energy, your emotions, and then one day, you wake up and realize you were just a temporary distraction from someone else's pain. I didn't want that for myself. So even though I found her attractive and felt the connection growing, I kept my emotional guard up. At least I tried to. But the more we spent time together, the harder it became to ignore that something real was forming. We went from casual text to long, late-night phone calls. We shared stories, childhood memories, and random thoughts. There were no grand declarations or sudden confessions, just a slow, steady unfolding of closeness. We started looking for reasons to see each other. Then one evening, we were at my apartment, waiting for some food we'd ordered. As we were lounging, laughing about something silly, and out of nowhere, Joyce looked at me and asked, "Why don't you have a girlfriend?" I chuckled. I said, "I do." She looked confused. "You do? How come I've never seen her?" I leaned back and replied, "You see her every day. I talk about her all the time. My girlfriend is you." Now, I said it jokingly. I wasn't trying to make some grand move. It was just playful. But she paused for a second, like she was actually thinking about it. Then she smiled and asked, "So I'm your girlfriend, and I didn't even know it?" We both laughed. It was one of those moments that's light-hearted on the surface, but carries a little more underneath. After that night, Joyce started being more affectionate, with small touches, longer hugs, and the way she looked at me. It was like she embraced the idea without us needing to spell it out. And honestly, I didn't correct it. I let it happen because it felt right. It felt like something mutual was finally taking shape. Something we both wanted, even if we hadn't officially said the words yet. After weeks of constant affection, I finally decided to stop pretending we were just friends and asked Joyce to be my girlfriend. I genuinely felt like we just clicked. The conversations flowed. The silences were comfortable. And when we disagreed, which wasn't often, we didn't fight to win, we listened. I'd never had that before. And I knew her past. I knew what her ex put her through. So I made a quiet promise to myself right then. I would never treat her like that. I wouldn't make her question her worth or second-guess her place beside me. I just wanted to love her in a way that made her feel safe, seen, and steady. After about a year of dating, the whole living arrangement just made sense. She was already spending most of her time at my place. We had routines. So we started talking about moving in properly, finding a space we could both call ours. Eventually, we found a bigger house in a quieter area. I covered the rent, and Joyce handled some of the bills. That's all I ever wanted. Living together made us even closer. At that point, I wasn't just in love. I was building a future with her in mind. If you had told me back then that it would all fall apart, I would have laughed. By our second year together, we decided to meet each other's families. We visited her family during Thanksgiving. I remember feeling a bit nervous, even though Joyce kept telling me they'd love me. Her parents were warm, polite, and curious. I tried to show them I was serious about their daughter. It went well enough, and they welcomed me. A few weeks later, it was my turn to bring Joyce home for Christmas. My family's a bit more laid back. Joyce fit right in. Watching her blend into my family meant something to me because she was becoming part of my foundation. That whole holiday season made our bond feel stronger. Not long after, we started having those deeper conversations about marriage, about kids, about building a home together. We both had stable incomes. We were in a place, financially, where raising a family didn't seem like a far-off fantasy. I was ready, and I believe she felt the same. That's why I decided to propose. I wanted it to be something special. So one evening, I left work early, teamed up with some of her closest friends, and we decorated our living room while she was out. Balloons, candles, rose petals, and right in the center, those words, "Will you marry me?" Our mutual friends were there too, ready to cheer, to witness that next step. When Joyce walked in, she was surprised and caught off guard. Still, she said yes, and I slid the ring on her finger. That night, we popped bottles of wine and took pictures. Everyone around us was celebrating the beginning of our forever. At the time, I didn't realize I had just proposed to someone who still had a secret she hadn't let go of. After the engagement, things picked up quickly. Joyce threw herself into wedding planning like she'd been waiting her whole life for it. She got an event planner involved within a week, and the two of them began working on every single detail. She was constantly flipping through magazines, scrolling through Pinterest boards, and calling vendors. Every evening, there was something new to approve or discuss. On my end, I didn't interfere much with the creative stuff. My role was mainly financial. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't mind. This was the woman I planned to spend the rest of my life with. If she was putting in the time and effort, the least I could do was show up with the money and the support. From the outside, we looked like a team. One quiet evening, Joyce had just stepped out to walk a friend to her car. But while she was gone, her phone, left on the couch, began to ring. I'd never gone through her phone, never had a reason to. When I picked the call and said hello, the call ended. I was surprised and wanted to know who had that number, but her phone was locked, of course. But I had seen her type in the code so many times. I tried it, expecting nothing. But the screen unlocked. I went straight to the call log. The number wasn't saved. That made me pause. I tapped into the messages. That's when my stomach dropped. Some of the texts were missing. She had deleted her side of the conversation. But what was left behind said enough. From the conversation, it was clearly a man, and he was replying to something she had sent. He said he understood that she couldn't see him anymore now that she was engaged and preparing for her wedding. He sounded disappointed, but not surprised. As I scrolled further, I saw more. He was trying to change her mind, reminding her of their connection, telling her they were meant to be. He talked about how things used to be between them. He was pleading in a way that told me this wasn't the first time they had reconnected. That was when everything clicked. This was her ex, the one she said had hurt her, and the one I thought she had left behind long ago. Turns out, she never truly did. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. They had been meeting up before I even proposed. And the way he mentioned our place, it sounded like they had a regular spot. I don't know. What I do know is this. She had been seeing him behind my back, and she had looked me in the eye every single day like nothing was wrong. I quickly took screenshots of everything I could before I heard the sound of her footsteps at the front door. I locked the phone, set it right back where I found it, and walked out. I didn't know where I was going, but I sat in my car for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of everything. This wasn't just some random guy. This was someone she said had broken her heart. And now, she was sneaking around with him behind my back, while we were planning a future together. While we were choosing wedding colors and sending out invites. For the next few days, I went through hell quietly. On the outside, I still showed up to work. Still made small talk when necessary. But inside, I was crumbling. I couldn't bring myself to confront her right away. It wasn't fear, it was confusion and disbelief. I couldn't understand how someone I loved so deeply, who claimed to love me just as much, could betray me in such a calculated way. This wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. After sitting with the truth for a week, I realized I couldn't carry the weight of what I knew anymore. The silence was eating me up from the inside. I was still sleeping under the same roof with a woman who had betrayed me. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. There was no future in this. Not for us. Not for me. So, I made a decision. I didn't want drama or to drag it out into a long, bitter argument. That morning, before I left for work, I sat down and wrote her a letter. I laid everything out in that letter. I told her I knew about the other man. I told her how I found out. I told her that the wedding was off, that I couldn't go through with marrying someone who had been lying to me with a straight face. But I also gave her a chance to leave quietly. I instructed her to take everything that belonged to her and leave the house before I returned later that evening. I told her clearly that if she didn't, I'd start making calls. I would tell her family, her friends, everyone who needed to know exactly what she had done. I placed the letter where I knew she'd find it, right on the kitchen counter, next to her favorite mug. Then I walked out. A couple of hours later, while I was still at work, my phone started blowing up. It was her. Joyce had found the letter. She was calling nonstop, sending messages one after another, saying she needed to explain that I had it all wrong, that it wasn't what it looked like. But I didn't respond. I had already said what I needed to say. There was nothing left to clarify. I didn't go home that night. I needed space, not just from her, but from the whole situation. I booked a hotel and turned my phone on silent. I knew if I walked through that front door, she'd be sitting there waiting, trying to cry her way out of what she did. And I wasn't interested in hearing rehearsed apologies from someone who only seemed sorry after getting caught. The next day, when I finally did come home, I saw that she hadn't left like I'd asked. Her things were still there. She was still there. She said she wanted to talk, that I owed her a chance to explain herself. But I didn't owe her anything anymore. I told her plainly that she needed to leave, not later, not after another conversation, but now. She didn't argue much after that. She packed up and went back to her parents' house. And just like that, it was over. She had her chance to leave quietly, but she clung to the idea that she could somehow talk her way out of what she did. But for me, that door had closed the moment I wrote that letter, and I meant every single word in it. After everything happened, people started reaching out. Mutual friends, a few of her family members, even some people I barely talked to before suddenly wanted to play peacemaker. Everyone had something to say, some telling me to hear her out, others asking me to forgive her, saying things like, she made a mistake, or maybe it didn't mean anything. But here's the thing, this was something she deliberately did, and did well enough that I wasn't even supposed to find out. The only reason I knew it all was pure luck. If that call hadn't come in at the wrong time, if I hadn't glanced at her phone when I did, I would have gone through with marrying someone who was still emotionally tied to another man behind my back. That realization hit harder than the betrayal itself. It meant everything I thought we had was built on a lie I didn't even know existed. And that's what made it impossible for me to go back, no matter how many people tried to talk me into understanding or talking things through.